All right. Good morning, good evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for Thursday Thoughts. So excited to be able to say that for the first time. And we're so pleased that you have taken time out of your busy schedule to join us. I have a double sound going on. Sorry about that. Okay, there we are. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I know for some of you, this is a familiar format, and we've done this before with colleges. So pleased to be able to do a new format for boarding schools and day schools. And so for you families who have younger students, younger children who are considering studying abroad, or maybe you're already in the application process, welcome here. My name is Gloria. I am one of the co-founders of Initial View, and I am host of Tuesday Talks, which is a webinar series for people who are interested in applying to university. And now we're starting this new mini series, and I'm so grateful to my colleagues who are joining me for this first time of doing this type of webinar. While I wait, we are actually waiting for our other panelist. She will be here very soon. But in the meantime, while we wait, I would love for everybody to make sure they're in the right place, because I know some people are looking for Chinese translation. So if you need Chinese translation, or you would like, or Zoom is just not cooperating with you, we are going to encourage you to go to 小儿通. So 如果你需要中文服务的话，如果需要中文翻译的话，你可以扫这个二维码。You can scan this QR code. If Zoom is not cooperating, but YouTube's working great, we are on YouTube as well, live streaming. So lots of places for you to go, because I know sometimes the internet's not cooperative, but we want you to be able to hear this. And we are recording this. So if somehow your internet doesn't cooperate tonight, hopefully you'll be able to revisit this later. I also want to say a special thank you to Shang Nancy Friends. They're our co-sponsor this week, and they have some great counselors who are available to answer questions about all sorts of application process, but also about how to be a great student and how to try to understand who you are and learn about your character. These are all really great things that are going to be important to you when you apply to school. So wanted to say special thanks to them. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and make sure we see people. And yep, my other colleague will be joining in just a second. She confirmed that she'll be joining. But before she joins, I'll go ahead and introduce my guests today. We've got two amazing schools. One is called Pomfret and one is called Northfield Mount Hermon. And they are both in New England. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about New England. For those of you who've been to the US, you might have visited before. It is a beautiful part of the United States. It is also a very historical part of the United States. And I will let our colleagues share a little bit about that. But Susan, would you like to go ahead and start and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hello, my name is Susan Montiel-Going. I am the Dean of Enrollment Management at Pomfret School. Pomfret is located in Pomfret, Connecticut. So one of the states that's associated with that New England region. Being in New England is a really special treat. As Gloria mentioned, a lot of history, a lot of universities in the area. It's known as a mecca for some fantastic schools. It's also really wonderful to experience all 4 seasons. So something that is, again, unique to New England. You get a taste of fall, winter, spring, and really, again, that means enjoy a lot of the extracurricular activities that can be associated with the different seasons as well. So Pomfret, as you see, we consider ourselves kind of a small school with about 350 students. What does that mean for you as a student? It means that you're going to really be known, not just on the academic side for the things that you're interested in, but for who you are as a person. We're a school that grows a little bit every year. So we start off generally with about 60 ninth graders years. We add about 40 or so new 10th graders, and then we add a few 11th graders as well. So we often will have anywhere from 10 to maybe max 20 new students that will start with us for their 11th grade year. Generally, we don't take any students as one-year seniors. We want to, again, there are many graduation requirements that sometimes it can be a little tricky just to fulfill some of those in one short year. But we do also welcome some postgraduates. So students who have completed their high school experience, want one extra year of high school before they're ready to embark in college, whether it's because they're on the young side or some students choose to do a postgraduate year for athletic reasons. We usually welcome anywhere from 10 to 15 new postgraduates a year. And that's a really fun and exciting piece for our students, right? To always, even though we're a small school, be in a position where they are making new friends and making new connections, and learning about new interests and new perspectives from the rich diversity that's part of the student body. Advising tends to be a hallmark here at Pomfret, something that all of our students are part of an advising group. And you actually get to tell us a little bit about what you're looking for in an advising group. So what are some of the characteristics that you would like in an advisor? What kind of group would you like to be in, a mixed age group or one that is a little closer just to your grade level? So we take student voice and agency really into everything that we do here at Pomfret. And because advising is so central to your experience as a student, your advisor is someone who stays with you throughout your time at Pomfret, right? You might have different dorm parents as you move from dorm to dorm in a given year. But your advisor becomes a great resource, kind of like an extended family member for you. We do advising dinners in our home every Tuesday night, and they become, again, just a fantastic resource as you're thinking about course selection, stepping out of comfort zones, working through any potential issues that you might have navigating with your roommate. For parents, the advisor is your go-to person as well. So instead of needing to track down 7 teachers, you go right to your child's advisor, who is in frequent communication with the teachers, with your child, to make sure that they are maximizing the program, happy and safe. So advising is, again, a big cornerstone to the Pomfret program. And then we also offer a variety of things that I think are pretty unique and special to Pomfret, whether it's Project Pomfret, which allows for about 10 days of just exploring topics that are uniquely of interest to you. It doesn't have to be related to any coursework that you are taking in your class, but if you've ever wanted to dedicate 10 days to community service, or to maybe teaching health and wellness classes to younger students, doing some independent research and learning how to build a motorcycle. A lot of students come up with some really cool projects that they get to explore as part of their Project Pomfret. Kids also have an opportunity to, I think oftentimes in high school, you start developing, maybe a little earlier for some students, but really in high school, oftentimes kids start figuring out, wow, I'm really passionate about STEM, or I'm really passionate about dance. I'm really passionate about social justice. Pomfret has this really great program called the Certificates Program. You can think about it kind of like a mini major in college. So students are able to think about 6 different domains of learning and build a portfolio about related to that topic. So whether it's STEM, social justice, arts, again, lots of opportunities for kids to do a deeper dive in areas that they're passionate about. And then when it comes time to apply to colleges, have some demonstrated examples of their passions for that college application process. Lastly, I'll share, I think the sciences are really important and popular at Pomfret, whether students are engaged in the Helios aquaponics program, so looking and doing some work on our observatory, doing an environmental science program called Global Sustainable Development, where students then get to travel to Costa Rica and try on for size some of the things that they've been learning in the classroom. Science is really, really exciting and popular at Pomfret, so much so that we're on the path to start building a $25 million science center in the upcoming school year. So it's really, again, an opportunity, even at a small school like Pomfret, to do deep dives into things that are of interest and passions to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction. And yay, my colleague Meta is here. And so we're so excited that she's here and she can introduce her institution as well. And just right before she does that, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you were looking for Chinese translation, 如果需要中文服务、中文翻译的话, you can go to our other link, which I put in the chat. And another reminder, please do start asking your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, because maybe we can fold it into our conversation. I just want to make sure we have time to get to everyone's questions. So, okay, without further ado, Meta, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening to you all. I am here to introduce Northfield Mount Hermon, or as many of you call it, Beiyishan. So I'm so excited to get to talk to you guys. I haven't been in China in 3 years now, and I miss some Beijing duck. Let's go. But I when I was looking at boarding schools, I was looking at 14 boarding schools. My sister was at Choate, and she loved Choate and had a great experience there. And when it was my turn to look, I came on Choate's campus, and it didn't fit me. It wasn't where I felt like I wanted to be. And so then my dad said, well, let's go look at NMH. And I didn't even get out of the car, and I knew that it was the place for me. So when you're looking at schools, really make sure that it punches you in the gut and you really find a match. People talk about best fit for school all the time. There's going to be a lot of schools that fit you, that you can fit in, but there's going to be one best match. I loved NMH so much that after a life of working on Nickelodeon, MTV, I worked on Broadway, I taught in New York City schools, that I came back to NMH, and I stayed for 1 year. And that 1 year has now turned into 15 years. Who knew? So now I got to tell you why. So NMH, we are in a pocket corner in Western Massachusetts. We are rural, meaning that our closest town is about 15 minutes away, and it has like 10 restaurants and a movie theater. That's about it. So we're about 3.5 hours north of New York City, about 2 hours west of Boston. And the one great part about being in this area is that we've really had a place to expand. We're on 1,500 acres. Our core campus is 200 acres. And on there, we have kids running around doing all sorts of amazing things, right? The 642 students, 25% of them are international from 59 countries. So when you're in the classroom, you could be with somebody, next to somebody from Uganda, you could be next to somebody from Kazakhstan, you could be next to somebody from down the street in Shanghai, right? It's a really wonderful place like that. And you have 33 countries as well represented. My family is the only family who does not live on campus. Everybody else, so 99.9% of the faculty live on campus. And, not only does that create a place of great relationships and such, but it allows parents to feel really comfortable that they know that we truly are a boarding school. We tell people all the time that we are only 85% boarding It is not true. It is because that about 10% of our day students are actually faculty kids who live in the dorm. So we're more like 95% boarding, and that other 5% comes on campus. I know it's been really hard with COVID lately. We are one of the schools who really, really benefited from COVID in the way that when kids weren't on campus for those 3 months, we were then able to really get cracking on building things. So something as simple as we opened up a coffee house called Time Out, where kids can get coffees on their way, lattes, espressos, anything fancy that they want on their way to class. We opened up a new multi-purpose sports center. We redid our fitness center called the Calgione Fitness Center. We redid our hockey rink. We built 4 new faculty houses. And the best part is we opened up our new Gilder Center for Math and Science. It's a building that I kind of don't like because whenever I go and I'm looking like this, because I'm looking at everything with my mouth wide open. It's an amazing, amazing building. And it's got everything from doors, like garage doors that open this way. So you can roll the car in and work on a car, or you can combine classrooms and make it a giant warehouse classroom. So some really great things that are happening in there. Downstairs is all makerspace. It's where both our robotics club and our create club get to meet. And just so this week they're working on 3D printing boxcars, and they're doing a boxcar racing. One of the main reasons that we've been doing all this is because we also got rid of all our APs. For those of you who are like, oh my God, why did you get rid of your APs? If you're interested in taking a US history class, the US history AP course, you stop learning in the 1960s. So I can't imagine how it can call it good education if there you are not learning about in the next 60 years of how that impact the United States, right? So if you're only learning up until JFK, right, but you're not learning about Reagan, you're not learning about Obama, you're not learning about Trump, we cannot, as at Northfield Mount Hermon, say that we are fully teaching you a good education. That also allows us to go way beyond APs. Our math classes, if you were teaching AP, you would stop at AP calculus. We actually go to multivariable linear algebra, number theory, graphing with Python. So our maths go all the way up to what would be considered a third-year level university course, right? Intertwined in our advanced program is we have senior capstones. We have a social entrepreneurship program where students are able to submit business plans and then get funded by the school to implement them into our community, which is a really amazing thing. I have one student right now who is actually doing medical research on how viable tests actually are in detecting viruses. She started this pre-COVID, so it's really cool that we're now seeing real life information and how it works. The last thing that is really important to our school is everyone has a work job here. And what that means is kind of redundant, I get it. Our school started as a farm, and it started as a farm for girls who could not afford to pay the school. And our head founder at that point was so progressive that he said, it's really important for me to be able to educate everybody. And I know you can't afford it, but how about we start making this farm to a place where it can raise actually money and we can sell our things, so then we don't have to have you pay tuition. So today we still, even though students have to pay tuition, we do say that every student has a responsibility at the school in paying forward the gifts that they've learned here. Every kid gets some sort of financial scholarship. It costs X amount to to educate you here, and you have about $10,000 less is what you guys pay. So you could be on our farm making apple cider or making maple syrup. You could be at the dining hall, wiping down tables or helping cook the meal for that day. You could be a tour guide. You could be a science lab assistant. All these great jobs, and there's about 200 jobs on campus. My favorite is working in the bakery. Chocolate croissants every morning. That's what you get to do. Yum. Chocolate cookies, name it. I think the one thing that bothers me about social media is when I go onto like websites to check about, excuse me, NMH and different programs, all I start reading is about how good our food is. You guys, our food is so good, like seriously. But if you are a student who comes to NMH or has a brother or sister, or you come from a visit, please also write about all the other awesome things that happen at NMH and not just our food. All right, that's me, Gloria.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so fun for me to get to hear about the schools from different perspectives. And, on these talks, I always encourage students. I know it's been really hard, families, it's been really hard because you have not been able to travel for so long. And we do get these kind of like very narrow views of schools based on what we see on social media or what we see on WeChat or what we see on the internet. And so I know that we are all kind of Zoom tired or Showatone tired or, webinar tired. But so I really appreciate people getting online still. And when you come to these talks and when you go to other talks, the real thing is to be asking these kinds of questions to try to get at the different angles of a school, because like Meta said, you do want to kind of have that punch in the gut. You do want to kind of feel like, oh gosh, this is the place where I really can see myself. And it's not just, I think a lot of times families are like, okay, well, what about where do these kids go to college? Is my child going to be safe? And yes, those are really important. And I think every school that we're going to interview here on Thursday Thoughts, you're going to get a sense of, yes, there is safety there. Yes, there are people who are going to care for my kid there. And, and yes, people are successful. The students will go to college. But there are a lot of other things that you want to make sure that your student feels like a sense of belonging and a sense of like, I can really thrive and grow here. I'm going to have the support that I need to be able to meet my potential. So we're going to start with some questions that are kind of like a little bit broader, just because there are people here who this is the first time they're kind of considering going abroad for high school. There are others who are probably in the application process. In fact, they've probably already inquired either of you and said, like, I would like to, start the process. So, but what makes, for both of you, I mean, one, you've been at a boarding school as a student, but also you've seen lots of students come through. What makes a student the right fit for boarding school to begin with? Because there are a lot of options for students. And I know that families here are probably thinking, well, we now have a lot of international options in China as well, or in our home country. What makes it where a kid is going to thrive and be like, boarding school is the way to go for them? And either of you can just jump in whenever.
I'll start. I think it has to be student driven, right? If a student needs to want that experience, want a sense of that increased independence, to live in a really diverse environment, to want to learn from their friends, to want to engage. A lot of these schools are looking for, again, people who are going to immerse themselves in the community, because we all benefit from people authentically being themselves, sharing their gifts, sharing their talents, asking questions. So I think first and foremost, the student has to be excited about the opportunity to board. It can't be the parents wanting that for their child for a variety of reasons, because it is the student who's going to live the experience.
Yeah.
I also think there's so many different reasons. Some of them is that needing a different space to grow. So clearly in those schools, we all have different teaching methods, right? And everyone's always like, I want to do Harkness. I want to do Harkness. You don't really want to do Harkness. You want to do roundtable discussion, which is different from Harkness, right? Harkness means that you're at one table, you can never get up, you can't use media. So you want roundtable discussion, and it's really looking at those little things. I would also say I think boarding schools fit kids who are okay at failing, meaning if you're afraid of failing, you're not going to try new things, right? We want you to try new things. And, my job is to sit there and catch you, right? And sometimes parents are awesome, right? I have actually 4 sets of parents, believe it or not. So parents are great, but how much greater to come to a boarding school where you have 200 sets of parents, right? Who are here to catch you and to guide you and share their different experiences to help you grow. So those are the benefits of boarding school in that sense. I mean, both Susan and I have high school age kids, right? In prep schools. Would I send my kid to prep school if I did not work at one? Absolutely. Are there people who have who can offer my daughter different things, different advices, all those different things? Yes. Right. So I think it's understanding how I'm going to grow in that space to not only prepare for college, but for the world. So yeah.
Yeah. So, there are a lot of options, obviously. And I think it can get overwhelming to, in the research process, for definitely for the student. They're young and still learning what research even means. And for families, it's really difficult because a lot of times the websites, like you said, the websites kind of maybe only focus on a few of the things, but so what are some recommendations for how to do research on schools? I know that our audience, they really rely on some third party or counselor or agency to kind of help them through it. But do you have some advice on how to kind of pick through a website or pick through a list, or how to kind of go about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't know how many times we have to repeat this. There is no official listing for boarding schools. 1. 2, there is no official listing for boarding schools. Again, you cannot compare boarding schools. And if you even just see for US News, right? Even Yale and Harvard just dropped out of whatever their listing is. It is so minimizing and archaic. Gosh, I don't know how you would translate archaic in Chinese. What would that be, Gloria?
I'll ask my team.
Archaic to use lists in that way. So if you on our website, for instance, we actually have a compare and contrast checklist that you can print out, and when you're starting to research schools, you can write answers and do a comparison. And it's something as simple as like how big the school is, what is the international student number, to like how many courses they are, right? To then a little bit of deeper things. My biggest advice in really understanding how to look for a school is find one school that looks pretty cool on the website, or pick 5, ask that school for a student from your country. So if you're calling from China, ask them, can you connect me with a current Chinese student or an alum, right? And the question should not be, where else did you apply? It should be, tell me about your experience, right? Tell me about how you did at Pomfret. Why did you like Pomfret so much? Why was it a great match for you, right? And in your exploration of Pomfret or Northfield Mount Hermon, were there other schools that really welcomed you and seemed like they would be a good fit for you as well? Right? So talk to people, talk about their experiences, right? Again, I applied to 14 schools and some really, it was a very different world. I got into all 14 of them. Very different world than what y'all are doing now. But I remember like having to talk to people and being like, yeah, that doesn't fit. No, this is better, just based on their experiences.
Yeah, when my son was looking at high school options, I had him sit down and make his own list of his must-haves, right? What are the things that he is really looking forward to in high school? What are the things that worked for him in his previous schools? What are the things that didn't work for him, right? I think again, making sure that students are centered in this search, because they're the ones that are going to live the experience, is just so important. And we really, again, approached it with, I was going to here at Pomfret, certainly Pomfret was an option. And we looked at our public schools. We looked at a few other boarding schools as well. And, for him, he decided Pomfret was the right place. He's a 10th grader here, and it's been wonderful. I think a bonus for me to be able to see and experience the curriculum through him. And I think, again, finding a school that is, as you develop that list, right? I think sometimes I agree with Meta, ask those questions, ask to be connected with alumni, with current students. And then again, sort of make sure that when you get to that selection process, that you have a range of schools, right? Pomfret's a small school. NMH is kind of a mid-sized school, right? There are schools that are much bigger. And there might be a school that, again, is not on your initial list. We're both co-ed schools. There are all single gender schools, right? I think I often encourage families to, develop that list and then maybe add one or two that fall outside of that bubble, but that also complement or have many of those other must-haves on your students list. So if most of the schools that you're looking at are co-ed schools, maybe add one or two single gender schools, right? So that as you're going through the process and learning, I think students learn a lot about themselves in the application process, about what they're looking for, what their hopes and dreams are. And so you might find that you fall in love with a school that wasn't on your initial list. So it's really important to approach it with an open mind. As Meta said, the times where she applied to boarding schools and your process right now are really different. And so you want to make sure that you are leaving yourself great potential to find success at a variety of schools. But certainly, again, listen to your gut on what's the best fit at the end of the process.
So part of looking for that is part of what could be on the checklist is obviously location. And we just mentioned that y'all are from New England. So what are some of the things that make being in New England great? Like, what do you wish people knew about New England? And why New England? I think there is some romanticism about it for people who don't live in the US, or even people who do live in the US. But is there something about at New England that would make a family feel like, oh yeah, this is why I would want to go there?
One thing, I just sent the link for NMH's school research checklist to Gloria so she can pass that along and share that as needed. how do I say this about New England in the sense that you can't walk like 5 miles in any direction without hitting a school. You just can't. There's schools everywhere. So even if I'm driving down a main highway, which is 91, I can literally be like, all right, let's start with us. Then we hit Eagle Brook. Then we hit Deerfield. Then we hit Bemet. Then we hit Stoneleigh Burnham. Like, it's just schools. And that's just within the 20 minutes of us, right? But what it is with the colleges and everything's in this area, the community within New England is a very privileged community steeped in education, right? So most people are always talking about academic excellence. They're talking about diving into communities to help and support. And it is like a mindset within this area that I think you can probably find in California, and that's pretty much it, right? So the coasts have so many schools and have so many people who believe in how education can shift the world and do work in the world. And that's why New England is always pushing itself. It's why, people landed here 20 years later, Harvard was born. So, yeah. Susan?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as I said, I think experiencing the 4 seasons is something really cool. Or the seasons is really amazing. You can enjoy warm summer days in the end of May, beginning of June, have great skiing as part of your experience in boarding schools. And there's a flow to the year that is really fun and fantastic. But absolutely, I think that educational excellence, the commitment to educational excellence in the New England area is something of historical proportions.
Yeah. Okay, myths. Let's talk about myths. What are some things that you have heard in all your travels that you want to be like, no, that's not what a boarding school is about, or or myths about the process, the application process, like, oh no, that's not what you're supposed to do. What are some common misconceptions that you get when you travel?
I think in the U.S. Boarding school for U.S. families, sometimes there's a little bit of a misconception of, boarding schools are where parents send their bad students to. That could not be farther from the truth. I think there are, again, at schools like Pomfret and NMH, there are students and families who are committed to education and growth and really excited about the future. And so I think that's one common misconception. I think throughout the admissions process, we understand that you're putting a lot of yourself, right? You're investing a lot of time, energy, emotion into finding a school that's the best fit for you. And unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, right, at all of the schools, we get many more applicants and applications than students that we can actually enroll and have space to join our communities. And some families feel that, again, a wait list or a notification that we think we're not the best fit for your child, that's a message that your child is not wonderful. That cannot be farthest from the truth, right? I think there have been many times where I've been in education for 20 years, worked in college admissions, all the way through elementary schools. And sometimes, again, even schools have to make tough choices about the number of beds that we have available. Mm-hmm. And so, not getting great news doesn't mean that your child is not wonderful, that we don't think you could be successful at our schools. It just means that we didn't have the space. And that's a really tough message to receive. But it doesn't mean, again, that there's any that there's anything wrong with you, or that we didn't think you could, again, enhance the community.
I'm going to relate just to the last 3 years. So NMH 3 years ago, our applications went up 30% full pay domestic. That's not even including international. 2 years ago, then we went up another 30% in that same number. And last year we went up 20%.
Mm.
Right? So we've had this huge growth in applications. So it's even more important to hear what Susan's saying. The way that I like to equate it is applying to boarding schools like going to the Olympics. Y'all are awesome. All of you are awesome. It just kind of stinks that only 3 of you get medals.
Mm.
Doesn't mean that you're not awesome and are not way above the rest of the world, right? But think about there's so many schools, you guys, that I feel like people do look at New England for prep schools, right? Cranbrook's awesome in Michigan, right? There's schools all over to look at. There's schools in Minnesota, there are schools, and yes, there are amazing colleges near them, right? So think about thinking outside the box of just New England, or, look down the coast, look at Mercersburg or Blair, or, and then if you're going out to Cali, look at Stevenson, Iolani in Hawaii. Why wouldn't you want to be in Hawaii? So there's such pluses to all of them. A boarding school is only as good as you make it. Right. So it's one thing if you can tell me that I can't apply to this school because I'm already coming in calculus as a freshman and I need to make sure that there's enough maths for me. Great. That I understand. But if you're saying to me, I'm not looking at those schools because I want to be in New England because it's New England, then I want you to think a little outside your box. Yep.
Yeah, great. Well, let's talk a little bit about like nitty gritty things that people should be doing. So, what are some things that families should do if they're just starting off? Like this is the first time they've heard of Pomfret and NMH. Like they just know that there's this concept of boarding school or concept of high school in the US. What are some first steps? I mean, you gave a great checklist, Meta, already. So that's a great kind of start. But what are some other things that families could do if this is their first time kind of considering?
Yeah, I think, of course, online events. We have 87 online events at Northfield Mount Hermon. There's no excuse or reason for you not to be jumping in on one of them. So I have one at 8:00 this morning with my head of school who's talking about traditions of NMH and how we're moving forward. I had one last night. I've been on Zoom a lot, you guys. I had one last night on mastering our application process and talking about writing an essay. I had 105 families on last night, right? And then I had one in the morning at 8:00 in the morning also on mastering the application, and had 96 families on for there. And a lot of them are from the other side of the world because that was their nighttime. So utilize the resources now that are online that schools have really had to shift and adapt.
Mm-hmm.
We've got everything from talkbacks to tours to class visits. I mean, name it. We are online. So start there.
I would say, again, get onto the school's website. Also beyond going to the events, often it starts with just submitting that inquiry form. That is your way of indicating to the school that you are interested in learning more, and it gives us that permission to reach out to you. So if you do all of these opportunities online, and some schools require registration, some don't, until you fill out that inquiry, we don't know much about you and don't know how to continue to give the information that you need in order to navigate the application process or start, differentiating between the schools. So fill out that inquiry if you can.
And you all have, like Meta said earlier, Chinese students, current Chinese students, or current or recent Chinese alum that who could connect, right? I think sometimes the reticence for some families is like, I can't even navigate the website. It's all in English and I just don't even know what it means. But so if there's a family who's like, I can't do it in English, what's your recommendation here?
So if you go on our website, there is a link to connecting with parents in your area, and you can email them directly. It's called through PeerPal. You can email them directly and then set up a time to chat with them. Right. So I connected one of our current parents to a prospective family the other day on WeChat, and they just did a WeChat call. But yeah, there are ways for you to get the information you need.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, well, because there are probably some students who've already kind of narrowed their list and they're in the process of applying right now, and maybe they already had an interview or they're about to have an interview. What's some advice for those that are currently in the process? I know, they should have gone to the Mastering the Application Zoom. but are there, like, what advice do you have on, the actual application, essay writing, interviews? Like, what are you wanting to see in that application?
Be yourself. I think we're trying to learn about you so that we can imagine what you might do and who, what you might be like in the dorms, and how you'll help again keep our exciting communities going. So be yourself. Remember that you are interacting with real humans, right? I think you'll find admission officers are some of the nicest people. And of course, I'm biased. But having traveled, with Meta, with other, admission officers, we get really excited to learn about who you are and your interests and make that connection. So be yourself. We're real humans we don't expect perfection because we're far from perfect, right? And so just be yourself, bring your authentic self to the interview process. Certainly give, the essays and other pieces the time it deserves, so that you're making sure that if you are applying to Pomfret School, you don't say, this is why I love NMH, right? Make sure that if you're writing individual correspondence to schools, that you are dotting your I's, crossing your T's, making sure it's addressed to the appropriate school or admission officer, but just be yourself. That's what we're excited to imagine.
Mine is a little harsher because I'm mean, right? Mean.
Some nice people, some mean people.
Some nice people. We get sometimes applications, and yes, an application is a story, right? We at NMH read it like a book. It is a story. It is a story that you are trying to share. I like to know from your story about the last 2 years. While it's really lovely, you want to tell me what happened in kindergarten and in first grade, and how you were brave enough to get up on that stage and sing in kindergarten. Let's just keep it to 2 years. I don't need to know about kindergarten. I don't need to know about first grade. So can we, for high school boarding schools, we like to know, if you're applying for 9th grade, what you've been doing in 7th and 8th grade, especially how COVID has impacted you, and how you've managed and been resilient, or if you struggled through that, how did you overcome those struggles, right? We want to know how best we can support you in each of our institutions. And unfortunately, you're learning about your dog Fufu in 4th grade kind of distracts from how we can best support you. Does that make sense?
Yes, I appreciate that honest feedback. And yes, like I think that is, well, and given COVID, I mean, that was my next question. You know, I think a lot of people are like, I don't have real experiences because I've been stuck at home for, 3 years. That's been a challenge of like, I need to think back, and all of my like achievements or real memories are from my childhood because I've been stuck. So given that boarding schools have such a great opportunity for extracurricular activities, for sports, for things like that, and given that these students really may not have been able to play a sport, how would you give a recommendation on how to kind of think through my last couple of years and how to tell you about that?
So I think I'll start off in that I didn't go to boarding school. The first time I went through an application process was when I was applying to college. And there were a lot of things that I did in my life that were important to me that I didn't think about putting on my application because they were just things that I did, right? And sitting with my guidance counselor, my high school guidance counselor at the time, and saying, I don't know what to put on this. I don't do as much because I have to work. And he said, that's a thing, right? You work. That not all students do that. And so put that down. And then he was like, well, don't you also like volunteer at your church and teach Sunday school? Yeah, but, right. And he's like, that's a thing, put that, right? So I think sometimes students forget to think holistically about some of the activities that they've done or things that are important to them because they just always do it. So as you're going through the application process, think about, again, some other things that are maybe not the formal class or other things, and think holistically about all of the things that you choose to dedicate your time to and why that's important. And I think also a lot of families have, during COVID, my son, my family, was an only child. He needed that socialization. We had to think really hard about how do we help him keep those connections, do things in a safe way. And families have gotten really creative, right? So we had a small pod of families that we felt comfortable doing community service with doing some sports training with, things like that. And so again, if you found those creative ways to still continue exploring your passion, even if you haven't done a formal sport in a while, share that information.
She's so much nicer than me. Yes, there's definitely a lot for how I say this. It depends. Again, do your research, you guys. If you love squash, not the school for you. I don't have squash, right? Or if you love water polo and you see that I have a swimming pool, yeah, I'm an awesome swim team. I do not offer water polo, right? That said, there are a lot of kids who also come from domestically around here who might have never done a certain sport before or tried out for the play or started in music. That's where I go about where I'm talking about not being afraid to fail, like jump in, right? I'm there to help support you. I'm there to provide coaching to help you. I'm there to provide music instruction for you, all these things to help support you and your interest, but make sure I have your interest available. I think is the most important thing. I had a kid who was like a giant entomologist, loved bugs, right? That's great, but I didn't know how to support that here, right? So I sent him to another school who has this giant beekeeping like production, right? And he was so happy. So think about already before you come, even if you just have an interest. So I just had a girl who emailed me, is like, Meta, I'm really interested in wrestling, but I've never wrestled before. I sent her right to the wrestling coach. Great. So they connected. Ask for those connections during your process as well.
Thank you for that advice. Well, we have just, I can't believe, like, the hour always goes by more quickly than I expected to. We have 5 more minutes. So if you didn't ask a question yet and want to ask a question, now is your chance. Because we are going to close right at the hour. Last words of advice, particularly just kind of some words of encouragement during, it's been a rough, I was going to say when I started, when I first logged on this morning, I was like, it's been a rough week for China. But it's actually been a rough 3 years for China. And so I know this process is tough. I know people are concerned about the well-being of their children. So any words of encouragement, words of advice through this, through this time?
There are some schools that are taking applications now that you can come in January. There's not a giant load of them, but I know it's been difficult. That's the most, I think, important to me, is being able to be open about when you're going and what your schools will look like in that process. As I said, I miss China. I grew up in Hong Kong for most of my life. So being on that part of the world is where I'm the most comfortable. And I'm so sorry I can't be there with y'all. So, yeah.
I think your resiliency, your optimism is something that is admirable and respected. And students from China who have come to our school community have enriched every aspect of the school. And so we're always so excited to get to know you, to have you share your gifts. And equally, I think, the school, I know for Pomfret, we have an amazing Asian Students Association. We have a well-being department that is really some counselors that are available to support students as they wrestle through, the difficulty sometimes of also just being away, right? Being away from home, worrying about family members back home. And so we try to support, again, our students. And if your child were to come to Pomfret, certainly we would want to do that and make sure that we remain sort of partners in your child's life and experience.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us so early in the morning, for getting up super early and doing this with us. And thank you for all the people who got on the call. I know getting on these calls is tiring, given that it's been like this for a really, really long time. And I know that you all wish that these admissions officers were in China doing their sessions and having their receptions. Like, that was super fun. And
Thanks
I know that
for hosting us.
Of course, I put contact information up here. I hope everybody can see it. Please do reach out if anything that Meta or Susan talked about today resonated with you and you want more information. They and their team and their faculty, people are available and wanting to talk to you and feeling. I know this isn't quite the same as in person, but it's close. It's close in that there are real people on the other side of the screen who really want to encourage you in the process and point you in right directions. So do reach out. We will be doing this again next week and the week after with different schools. And we tried very intentionally to pick quite a few different schools, ranges, sizes, types. Next week, we're going to talk to a group of Catholic schools. So join us if you can. If you've never heard about Catholic schools or don't really know, it's a good time for you to ask good questions. In the meantime, enjoy your evening.
Night, everyone.
Thank you so much again. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.